Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I hope you'll be doing well. This is Muhammad Imran, and today we will discuss English plosive sound. So this will be your lecture number 3. In lecture 1, we had introduction to phonetics and phonology. And in lecture 2, we discuss organs of speech. And in this lecture, which is lecture number 3, we will discuss English plosive sound. So I hope you will find this lecture very interesting and very informative, and you will find it quite different from the materials already available on YouTube. So let's discuss it. Before we start our lecture, we should know what are the main objectives of this session. So the first objective of this session is to understand plosive sounds in English phonology, to understand the place and manner of articulation of plosive sounds, and to know how plosive sounds are produced, and to differentiate lenis from fortis sound, and the last one to know about aspirated and unaspirated plosive sound. Plosive. English phonology has 6 plosive sounds, and they are b, d, g. The first one, p. It is voiceless plosive consonant sound, while the second one of this pair is voice plosive consonant sound. Now we have the second pair, and in the second pair, the first one is a voiceless, while the second one is a voiced. Similarly, in the third pair, the first one is a voiceless and the second one is a voice plosive consonant sound, which is pronounced as g. So these are 6 plosive sound in English phonology. Now, when we describe a consonant sound, it can be described by a place of articulation and by a manner of articulation. So, a plosive sound has a place of articulation and a manner of articulation. So, when we say a place of articulation, so we are trying to find out that what organ of speech are used in the production of speech sound. And in the manner of articulation, we try to find out that how a sound is produced. So this manner of articulation, it answers the question how. And place of articulation, it answers the question where. So that is actually where, place of articulation, and manner of articulation is actually how. Here we try to find out that how a sound is produced, and here we try to find out where a sound is produced. So that is where and that is how. Manner of articulation. So I told you that what is manner of articulation. By manner of articulation we mean that how a speech sound is produced. So it answers the question how. Now, the set b, d, g are all produced by some form of stopping of the airstream very briefly and then letting. Now, what does it mean? It means that when the airstream, which begins from the lungs and then comes through the larynx and pharynx, this airstream has to be stopped somewhere in the mouth and then abruptly release. So there would be stopping. First we have to stop the airstream and then we suddenly release. So that is why that plosive sounds are also called stop sound. You can see here that because why they are called stop sound, because the airstream has to be stopped with the help of some articulators, and these articulators can be lips or they can be tongue or alveolar ridge. So we will discuss these all plosive sound one by one in coming slide. Plosive. How to articulate. A plosive is a consonant articulation with the following characteristics. So here we have some of the characteristics of a plosive consonant sound. One articulator is moved against another. In this case, if we notice, so sometime a lower lip is moved towards upper lip. Plosive. How to articulate? A plosive is a consonant articulation with the following characteristics. So here we have the characteristics of a plosive consonant sound. One articulator is moved against another. For example, in the case of lips. So sometime we notice that a lower lip is moved against upper lip, because the lower lip is called an active articulator, while the upper lip is called a passive articulator. Or two articulators are moved against each other. And sometimes we notice that the two articulators are moved against each other, so as to form a structure that allows no air to escape from the vocal tract. So a structure is formed that no air to escape from the vocal tract. So the air is then restrained, or it is prevented that it should not be escaped from the vocal tract. And this structure is then total. So there will be total blocking of the air stream. Now another characteristic is, after this structure, when we restrain or when we prevent the air stream not to allow or not to escape from the vocal tract. So after this structure has been formed and air has been compressed behind it, it is released. That is, air is allowed to escape. So in this case, in the first case, the air is blocked, right? Or a structure is formed that allows no air to escape from the vocal tract. And then in the second feature or characteristic of this plosive consonant is the structure that has been formed and air has been compressed behind it, and then it is released. That is, air is allowed to escape. So in the first case, the air is blocked, right? Because a structure, a form of structure that does not allow the air to escape from the vocal tract. While in the second case, then the air which has been blocked, right? Now here it has been released. So here blocking and here releasing. Here we have four phases in the production of plosive sound. The first phase is when the articulator or articulators move to form the structure for the plosive. We call this a closing phase. It's a closing phase because only a structure is formed for the plosive sound. The second phase is when the compressed air is stopped from escaping. We call this the compression phase, because you try to stop the air from escaping. So this phase then called compression phase. The third phase is when the articulator used to form the structures are moved, so the allow air to escape. This is called the release phase. And the fourth phase is what happens immediately after the third, so we will call it the post-release phase. So in the first phase of the production of plosive sound, that is called a closing phase, and what happens here, only a structure is formed with the help of articulators, because one articulator or two articulators move against each other to form the structure. And then in the second phase, what happened, with the compressed air is stopped from escaping, we call this compression phase, because you stop, right? You stop the compressed air, that the air should not be pass or should not be allowed to pass. Now, in the third phase, what happened? The articulator used to form the structures are moved, so the laugh ear is escaped. This is called the release phase, because the articulators, with the help of which you have stopped the ear, now you are going to move those articulators, and by the time you move those articulators, the ear is released. And then the fourth phase is what happens immediately after the third, so we will call it the post-release phase. Now here we have a chart of plosive sound according to their voice. So a plosive sound according to voice can be voiced or it can be voiceless. Now out of 6 plosive sound, 3 of them are voiced and 3 of them are voiceless. So voiced plosive consonant sounds are produced as b, d, g, and plosive voiceless sounds are produced as p, t, k. So b, d, g, p, t, k. So these 3 are voiced and these 3 are voiceless. We will talk in detail about plosive sounds in coming slide. So here we have a complete chart of plosive sounds, and I hope you will get the whole concept of plosive sound from here. So plosive sound according to place of articulation. So according to place of articulation, a plosive sound can be bilabial, plosive sounds can be alveolar, and plosive sound can be velar. So bilabial sounds can be voiceless and they can be voiced. Alveolar sound can be voiceless or they can be voiced. And velar sound can be voiceless and they can be voiced. So we have two sounds, two plosive sound as bilabial, we have two plosive sound alveolar, and we have two plosive sound velar. Now first we come and talk about bilabial. So bilabial voiceless sounds are, for example, we have example is p. So p is a plosive voiceless sound. Or if you want to describe the sound p, so you will say, now if you want to describe the sound p, so you will say that it is a plosive bilabial voiceless sound. And you can make example with the sound p, and you can make words like pull and purse. Similarly, that bilabial sound can be also voiced, and we have the sound like b, and you can make words like bat and bell. Now according to place of articulation, a plosive sound can be also alveolar, and then alveolar can be also voiceless and also voiced. Example of voiceless will be like a tell and talk, right? And the example of voiced will be did and done. And similarly, that according to place of articulation, a plosive sound can be also velum. And then velum can be also voiceless and voiced. Example of velar voiceless would be king, queen, and corn, right? And the example of velar voiced sound will be goat and gone. So this is the overall chart of plosive sound. Let me summarize. Plosive sound according to place of articulation. So there are 3 places of articulation of plosive sound. They can be bilabial, they can be alveolar, or they can be velar. Now bilabial can be voiceless, they can be voiced. Alveolar can be voiceless, they can be voiced. And velar can be voiceless and velar can be voiced. So we have 2 bilabials, we have 2 alveolars, and we have 2 velars. Now bilabial 2, one is voiceless and one is voiced. Alveolar 2, one is voiceless, one is voiced. And velar 2, one is voiceless and one is voice. And these are the examples of these all sounds, example of sounds with examples. Now here we have place of articulation of stops. This is actually the elaboration of that chart. Now the plosive p and b are bilabial since the lips are pressed together, and t and d are alveolar since the tongue blade is pressed against the alveolar ridge. Now normally the tongue does not touch the front teeth as it does in the dental plosive found in many languages. Now the plosive k and g are velar. The back of the tongue is pressed against the area where the hard palate ends and the soft palate begins. So these all organ of speech we had already discussed in our previous lecture. So there is no need to again discuss in detail these organ of speech. So the first two, p and b, are bilabial, where the lips are pressed together to produce these two sounds. And again we have t and d are alveolar since the tongue or blade is pressed against the alveolar ridge. Now what is alveolar ridge, or which organ of speech is this? You can watch and listen my previous lecture where I have discussed. So t and d are alveolar since the tongue blade is pressed against the alveolar ridge. Normally the tongue does not touch the front teeth as it does in the dental plosive found in many languages. Now the plosive k and g are velar, and here the back part of the tongue is pressed against the area where the hard palate ends and the soft palate begins. So please watch my previous lecture where you can see that where is hard palate and where is soft palate. Now this is the illustration of place of articulation. In the first picture you can see bilabial articulators where the two lips are moved against each other, lower lip and upper lip. And here we have alveolar articulators where the tip or the blade of the tongue touches alveolar ridge. And here we have velar articulators where the back part of the tongue, it touches your soft palate. So this is soft palate and this is hard palate, where the hard palate ends, from there the soft palate begins. Now all six plosive can occur at the beginning of a word, initial position, between other sounds, medial position, like middle position, and at the end of a word or final position. So we can say that all these six plosive can occur at the beginning of a word, in the middle of a word, or end of a word. For example, the beginning of a word can be Pakistan, or like a pull, push, or it can occur in the middle of a word, like we can say people, and it can occur at the end of a word, like we can say map. So here you can see initial, middle and final position. Some more example: pin, and middle would be paper, and final would be keep. Similarly, in the beginning it can be bin, middle position would be rubber, and end position would be bulb. And similarly we have so tin and bitten and tent, dog, bidden and bid, king, bicker and kick, gun, bigger and big. Aspirated and unaspirated stops. So it means that a plosive sound can be aspirated or it can be unaspirated. So what is an aspirated plosive sound? An aspirated plosive sound is the one when you produce a plosive sound, and after a plosive sound you feel or you produce a puff of the air. And it usually occurs when a plosive sound is placed at the beginning of a word. For example, here we have a word pill. So you can see in the word pill, a plosive p is placed at the beginning of the word. So when a plosive sound is placed at the beginning of a word, so you can feel, or in fact you produce a papa of the ear which is subscribed as h. So you can see that pill and pill. So a papa of the ear is there. And in spill and spill, we don't have any papa of the ear because the p here it comes in the middle position. Similarly, till, and you can see that in till we have papa of the ear. So till is aspirated one while still is unaspirated one. Kill is aspirated one and skill is unaspirated one. So the initial stop of the first set, pill, till, kill are followed by a short papa of the ear which is not present after the stops in the second set of words. So you can see that in pill, in till and kill we have papa of the ear. So these sounds are to be called aspirated one. And in spill, still and skill we don't have any papa of the ear. So these sounds, these plosive sounds are to be called unaspirated ones. Now here we are with the last slide of this lecture, and that is Fortis and lenis. So some phoneticians say that p, t, k are produced with more force than b, d and g, and that it would therefore be better to give the two set of plosive and some other consonant name that indicate the fact. So the voiceless plosive p, t, k are sometimes called Fortis because when you produce this sound p, t, k, so you are using more force compared to in the production of other sound like b, d and g. So b, d, g which are a voiced sound, so you are producing less force in the production of these sound. So b, d and g are to be called lenis sound because you are producing less force in the production of these sounds. And p, t, k they are called Fortis because you are using more force in the production of these sound. So you can also call them p, t, k strong. You can call them Fortis because they are produced strongly. And b, d and g are then called lenis because when you produce them, so you are using less force. That's why they are also called weak. So then p, t and k, they are Fortis strong, and b, d and g, they are lenis because they are weak. Weak mean that we are using less force, and strong mean that we are using more force. So here we have example like we have Fortis bilabial p, t and k. So p would be bilabial and t will be alveolar and k will be velar. Similarly in lenis we have p bilabial, we have d alveolar and we have g velar. So the first three they are Fortis and the last three they are lenis. The first three are voiced voiceless, and the last three are voiced. So b, d and g are voiced, lenis, and p, t, k they are voiceless, Fortis.